Sponsored by Audible.
Hello my beautiful watchers. A video or two ago I was working on the House of the Dragon Lost in adaptation and I wrote down a bunch of stuff about the first half of the book, all the stuff that went on before the Dance of the Dragons, but ended up having to cut most of it out for time and relevance related reasons. However, it seemed a shame to let it all go to waste, so extra G.R.R. Martin stuff for everyone, hooray! I have no idea if this is even remotely still relevant at this point, as the first season of House of the Dragon is over and fading from people's mind zones, but I kind of enjoy making this sort of content, so even if it's just for me, let's do this. Now, I know I already talked about Aegon the Conqueror doing his conquering thing all over the Seven Kingdoms, even though it was only 6 in the end, but shh, in this hilarious but informative video, but this will be a bit more detailed than that, and it gives me a chance to correct some mistakes that I made there. For you see, despite what I foolishly claimed, Aegon wasn't born until about 3 generations after the fall of Valyria, and the Targaryens didn't technically build Dragonstone. It was the westernmost outpost of the old Valyrian Empire, and supposedly built using magic, which is why it was supposed to look all fucking crazy with every building looking like a stone dragon. Now, it's common knowledge at this point that the Targaryens loved their incest, but our boy Aegon loved it even more than average, as he married not 1 but 2 of his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys. Both of whom were dragon riders, so were seminal to Aegon getting his conquering on once his declaration of being in charge now was sent out to and rejected by the Seven Kingdoms. One of his most impressive early victories was when this total dickhead called Black Harren thought that he was safe raising a middle finger to the Targaryens because he had the biggest, baddest fortress in the entire country, but discovered that dragon fire was hot enough to melt said fortress like fondue cheese. The rest of the Riverlands, who had never liked Harren anyway, immediately joined Team Targaryen, and after seeing a hitherto utterly impregnable castle glow in the dark and disappear, King Stark of the North decided he would much rather be a lord than a king anyway, earning him the title The King Who Knelt in the history books, which seems a little mean to me, considering the king who saved his people from becoming flambé seems equally applicable. The veil was taken equally bloodlessly as, in a total boss bitch move, Visenya flew over all of their impressive defenses to land right on top of the Eyrie and politely offered the boy king there a ride on her dragon, flying him around the mountains a few times, and I like to think making eye contact with his mother the regent the entire time, after which the old girl immediately handed over all their crowns. The Westerlands and the Reach were brought in line after the notorious Field of Fire, in which Aegon decided that he just didn't feel like fighting a vastly larger army than his own that day, and instead unleashed all 3 of his family dragon riders at the same time, lighting up the entire battlefield like the 4th of July. His conquest wasn't all done by dragons though. His half-brother and best friend Baratheon had to take the Stormlands the old-fashioned way, i.e. gathering up a lot of people with pointy objects and hoping they can poke their enemies with them better than they can be poked back by equally pointy objects. BT Dubs, after he won the battle, he married the daughter of the Storm King he had just killed and took the house's sigil and traditions as his own, which is why the Stormlands banners didn't change the way the other defeated kingdoms did when they switched management. In the end, only one person ever successfully stood up to Aegon, and it wasn't a king or a general or a great knight. It was an 80-year-old blind woman who pulled it off with unconventional tactics and a ton of sass. When Rhaenys flew to Dorne, she found all of the major cities and towns evacuated. Even the capital city was a ghost town, except for the country's ruler, Princess Mira Martell, who was waiting there to talk to her.
It is time for Dorne to bend the knee and join my brother's kingdom.
No!
Very well. You will be made to see the error of your ways just like all the rest. Summon your banners and we will meet you on the field of battle and lay waste to your army.
No!
What do you mean, no?
I mean, no!
Ah, then you are surrendering.
No, we're just not going to line up in neat little rows to be barbecued like those other idiots.
Then we will burn your cities to the ground.
There's no one in the cities.
But you can't just... You have to either fight us or join us. That's how conquest works.
No!
But... can she do that?
And hilariously, yes, this tactic of simply refusing to play the game was the only defense that ever worked. Every time a Targaryen army turned up with a dragon, they found these cities abandoned, and every time they tried sending an army on its own, it got absolutely decimated by the harsh desert environment and guerrilla warfare. After a particularly large and humiliating anticlimactic invasion, Aegon tried claiming this counted as conquering them George Bush style, but the figurative minute he left, the Dornish leapt out of their hiding spots and massacred his occupation force. Now, of course, the Targaryens eventually lost their temper over this hardcore and started burning down all the cities, and the Dornish responded by sending raiding parties into the Reach and Stormlands to do some revenge burning, and it just kept escalating and escalating. Then the big moment happened. While attacking a Dornish castle, Rhaenys' dragon was shot down by siege weaponry, proving the mortality of the species for the first time in Westeros. The loss of Aegon's sexy sister wife obviously didn't de-escalate the acts of mass slaughter, but eventually Princess Mira died of old age, and her son decided he wasn't as into this whole war thing as she had been. No one knows how he talked Aegon into a ceasefire, but he did, and that was pretty much the last major conflict that Aegon had to deal with in his lifetime. He spent the rest of his reign doing a pretty good job of keeping peace within the kingdom, traveling around with a ton of knights and dragons, making friends and subtly reminding enemies that he had easy access to a ton of knights and dragons. Of course, as all men must, he eventually died, his eldest son Aenys took over, and everything caught on fire. Not literally for once, I just mean all the politics went to shit. Many lords of the Seven Kingdoms still remembered being kings, or had been quite looking forward to being a king someday, and as Aenys was a relatively sweet, sensitive man compared to his daddy, they got to wondering if this might not be the perfect time to re-establish the previous status quo. However, the first big challenge for this second generation of Targaryens wasn't a political one, but religious. When Aenys announced he had arranged a marriage between his son and daughter in the traditional Targaryen style, the High Septim, basically the fantasy pope, was most displeased.
Okay, no. Aegon was already married to his sisters when he showed up, but there's no way we're looking the other way again. Stop doing incest, you freaks. It's gross and weird, and you're pissing off our god.
But despite almost always being a complete pushover, it turned out not doing incest was too much to ask for, even for Aenys. So he stuck to his guns and sparked off a holy crusade against him. So many religious militant groups sprang up all over the kingdom, Aenys had to take his family and flee back to Dragonstone, and I kid you not, he died of stress a few days later. Gentlemen, that's a thing called consequences of one's actions, you know, the thing that should have happened when the fantasy Vatican was blown up? Never mind, you can't hurt us anymore. Despite Aenys having two sons, it was his little brother Maegor who swooped in at this point to claim the throne, and he proved a lot better at dealing with this shit. Taking up his father's sword Blackfire and his father's dragon Balerion, Maegor went about personally slicing, dicing, and incinerating his excessively religious enemies, to the point that only Old Town, the home of the High Septon, was left. Said High Septon seemed to be prepared to let the entire city burn instead of surrendering, but mere hours before Maegor showed up, somehow he ended up dead, while spending the night surrounded by people who were probably pretty incentivized to not be reduced to charred corpses. Unfortunately, the only thing that Maegor was better at than putting down holy wars was being a total dickhead, and he ruled so nastily and harshly he became known as Maegor the Cruel, though probably not to his face, or he was likely to cut yours off for annoying him. For example, as soon as the big red castle that Aegon had started building was finished, Maegor had all the builders put to death so they wouldn't be able to tell anyone about the secret tunnels and rooms he'd had added to the plans, which was a really shit retirement package. Not surprisingly, most of Westeros was like, fuck this noise, including Aenys' sons Aegon and Jaehaerys, who should really have been ahead of Maegor in the line of succession anyway. This would be a good time to mention that the Targaryen family tree really is a fucking horror show, and not just because of all the incest. It's really confusing because they keep using the same 6 names over and over again, and you only get a number added to yours if you're one of the kings. Anyways, Aegon was the first to have a go at rebelling, and it did not go well for him. His army was obliterated, and he and his regular-sized dragon were torn to shreds by Big Daddy Balerion. So Maegor got to go on being a complete dickhead for a bit, executing people, torturing family members to death, the full tyrant shebang, until his other nephew Jaehaerys popped up, suggesting to the kingdom that he might be a fun, not psychotic alternative, and what do you know, everyone agreed he would indeed be a better king than Stabby McDragonson, and all the great lords joined his side. Maegor was left with a very, very small army, but in the end Jaehaerys didn't even have to deal with that because Maegor was found impaled and sliced to ribbons on the Iron Throne. There was obviously some question about how this had come to pass, but most people were just happy it happened, so there was no CSIing to try and find the culprit. Thus began the reign of Jaehaerys the Awesome. And now, a quick word about this video's sponsor. Good news, my beautiful watchers. If for some bizarre reason you would prefer to get your Song of Ice and Fire knowledge from the source instead of delivered to you via a handsome but unnecessary middleman, you'll be glad to hear the main series and all of the supplementary material are available in Audible's unmatched online library of titles. And any one of them can be yours for the low price of nothing right this very moment if you use my link audible.com/noble or text noble to 500 and sign up for the commitment-free 30-day trial. You'll receive a credit that can be exchanged for any audiobook regardless of its price, and this title will remain yours even if you decide not to go ahead with the subscription after the trial ends. But don't be shocked if you decide to stick around anyway, because I meant it when I said unmatched. It is the very home of storytelling. Almost every book I've ever talked about on this channel is available on Audible, and if that wasn't enough, membership also grants you unlimited access to the Plus catalog, a treasure trove of audiobooks, original entertainment, guided fitness, meditation, sleep tracks, and podcasts. So again, that's audible.com/noble or text noble to 500 for a genuinely, absolutely free audiobook and tons of other goodies. Of course, he was only 14 when he started, so Lord Baratheon, the Hand of the King, and the Council served as regents for the first few years, but even before officially taking power, this little badass managed to get every single faction, from the leftover religious nuts to Maegor's holdouts, to calm the fuck down and play nice. Everyone was determined to marry Jaehaerys off to someone appropriate and country stabilizing, but the boy king had other plans because he had the old Targaryen incest lust for his sister, and they ended up eloping together before anyone could stop them. This is absolutely hilarious to me because, like, massive wars had just been caused by incest marriages, and all the Targaryens had to do to keep things nice and happy throughout the entire country was not do any more incest. The regent, the council, the king's mother, basically everyone was genuinely doing their best to end this practice and marry Jaehaerys off to someone he wasn't related to, but apparently no matter how hard House Targaryen tries, it just cannot stop doing incest. Luckily for them, even the fucking church gave up on trying to stop them and basically changed its doctrine to say that incest is an abomination for everyone except House Targaryen, who can do all the incest they like, just get on with it. We don't want to look at it. And it's good that they decided to be cool about him, because Jaehaerys had a really great reign for like decades. He rewrote all the confusing feudal laws and actually made them make a little sense. He managed taxes a lot more fairly. He built roads all over the kingdom, encouraged trade, helped his country through a pandemic in a way that put most real-life world leaders to shame, all that good shit. And he was damn close to being a feminist for a pseudo-medieval king. He always listened to his wife's counsel, so thanks to her, women's rights were increased across the country, and Perma Nocta in particular was outright banned. The Queen also took an interest in the Night's Watch, increasing their funding and lands after seeing what they were dealing with. Alas, the only thing this incest power couple seemed to have incredible bad luck with was their children. Over their long lives, they ended up having 13 children, but ended up outliving all but 2. 3 died from SIDS, 2 died giving birth to their own children, 1 died when she caught grayscale from the people she was caring for, 1 fell off her horse and broke her neck, another died when when his stomach ruptured during a hunt, another during the plague, yet another suicided after miscarrying, and Jaehaerys' intended heir to the throne took a pirate crossbow through the throat that wasn't even being aimed at him. Of the two that survived them, neither stayed in touch. They had a prince who was so crazy antisocial he eventually left to become a maester just so less people would talk to him, and a princess who caused massive scandal by being about as promiscuous as the average man, and eventually caused so much havoc she was sent off to become a nun, then promptly escaped, committing murder along the way, and sailed away to Essos to be a sex worker for the rest of her life. This incredible amount of bad luck leads us to the start of House of the Dragon, and there being no clear choice for who would succeed Jaehaerys upon his death. So yeah, a lot of shit happened in Westeros over the years, and I'm sure we'll find out much more as G.R. to the R. Martin continues to write anything and everything except the last bit of Winds of Winter. Maybe after House of the Dragon is done, I'll talk about what happened afterwards. It's going to be interesting to see exactly when they choose to end it because, well, spoilers, but the Dance of the Dragons, or at least its aftermath, kind of outlives all of its inciting participants, and there's some stuff that happens immediately afterwards that involves everyone's favorite Wolfie house from the north, so they might be tempted to cover that, or at least move it up in the timeline so it can be included. Anyways, thanks for joining me, my beautiful watchers. Don't forget all that good stuff that keeps YouTube channels healthy and alive, like liking, commenting, sharing, and subscribing if you're new. Valor Morgulis, but we can put it off for as long as possible, so take care of yourselves out there. Much love and appreciation to my patrons of honor, Shelby Holtz, Quint, and April Mack. It was an 80-year-old blind woman with enough sass to finish a sentence, because I didn't on the script. Go away, helicopters, no one likes you. Doing the waiting for a helicopter to fuck off, man. Every time a Targaryen? Who the fuck are the Targaryens?